Most people miss this one psychological truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a hidden pattern in human behavior that quietly controls conversations, relationships, power, attraction, and almost no one realizes it's happening. While it's happening, you think people act because of logic, because of morals, because of personality, but that's not what actually drives them. What I'm about to reveal isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, and it doesn't look like control in fact, it often looks like kindness. It looks like silence, like patience, like understanding, and that's why it works. Because the most powerful psychological influence never announces itself. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why some people always seem to get their way without arguing, without forcing, without ever being obvious, and more importantly, you'll start noticing when it's being used on you. Stay with me. Because what we're about to uncover sits in the uncomfortable space between awareness and manipulation. And once you cross that line, everything about human behavior starts to make sense. If understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior fascinates you, the unspoken rules, the subconscious patterns, the quiet power play, subscribe. Because what's coming next won't just entertain you. It will shift how you see people forever. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling slightly off? Nothing bad happened, no argument, no obvious tension. But hours later, you replay it in your head and think, why did I agree to that? Why did I explain myself so much? Why do I suddenly feel smaller? That wasn't an accident. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most influence doesn't happen through words. It happens through emotional positioning. Who feels safe? Who feels uncertain? Who feels the need to prove something? Control isn't about domination. It's about who sets the emotional frame. And whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. Picture this. You're in a group conversation. Everyone's talking, sharing opinions, trying to be heard. But there's one person who barely speaks. They listen. They pause before responding. When they do speak, it's short, measured, and somehow, when they finally say something, everyone leans in. That's not charisma. That's psychological gravity. Silence creates perceived depth. The human brain fills gaps automatically. When someone speaks less, we assume they're thinking more. We assign them intelligence, confidence, authority, not because they earned it, but because our minds needed to explain the silence. Here's the dark part. That person didn't convince anyone. They let others convince themselves, and self-generated beliefs are the hardest to break. Now think about someone you know who's incredibly polite. They never push, never raise their voice, never demand, yet somehow things always go their way. Plans adjust around them, people accommodate them, boundaries bend. Why? Because they trigger reciprocity pressure. When someone is consistently calm, patient, and understanding, your brain quietly says, they're being reasonable. If I say no, I'm the bad one. That internal pressure does the controlling for them. They don't force compliance. They create emotional debt. And most people pay it without realizing why. Have you ever been asked a question that didn't feel like a question? Are you sure that's the best idea? Why do you feel the need to do that? On the surface, harmless, curious, even caring, but inside, it subtly puts you on trial. Now you're explaining yourself, justifying, defending. The power shifted the moment you answered, because control often begins with who's explaining and who's observing. The observer holds the higher psychological ground, and once that dynamic forms, it tends to stay. Here's the question most people never ask. Why do some people naturally fall into positions of influence without trying? And why do others constantly feel like they're chasing approval, even when they're capable, intelligent, and skilled? It's not confidence. It's not intelligence. It's something much quieter, something operating beneath awareness. And here's what most people never realize. The same psychological mechanisms that allow someone to influence gently can also be used to control silently. And once you understand how the subconscious responds to emotional cues, you'll recognize the darker patterns hiding in everyday interactions. The subconscious doesn't respond to arguments. It responds to signals, status signals, safety signals, threat signals, and most of those signals are non-verbal. Tone, timing, stillness, eye contact, emotional restraint. When someone stays calm while you're emotional, your brain registers them as higher status. When someone doesn't rush to respond, your brain assigns them power, not because it's true, but because your nervous system evolved that way. This is ancient wiring, and dark psychology exploits that wiring. One of the most effective silent control techniques is withholding, not affection. Not communication, but emotional reaction. Have you ever noticed how unsettling it is when someone doesn't react the way you expect? You share good news, they nod calmly. You express frustration, they listen without rushing to comfort you. Your brain immediately asks, did I do something wrong? Do they care? What am I missing? That uncertainty pulls your attention toward them. Attention creates influence. Influence creates control. And the person withholding didn't say a word. Here's the twist. The more emotionally someone appears, the more people orbit them, because humans are drawn to emotional anchors. When someone doesn't need you, your subconscious wonders why, and curiosity turns into pursuit. This isn't romance psychology. This is power psychology, and it works everywhere. Have you ever noticed how the person who cares the least often has the most control? That's not coincidence. That's emotional asymmetry. And asymmetry always creates hierarchy. Most people think control looks like convincing someone, but convincing is effort. Real influence comes from deciding what the conversation is about, instead of arguing whether you're right. You subtly shift the discussion to how the other person feels. Now they're talking about themselves. Instead of defending your decision, you ask them to explain their concern. Now they're invested. Instead of reacting emotionally, you slow the pace. Now they're adapting to you. The one who sets the frame decides what matters. And whoever decides what matters wins. If these patterns are starting to click, you're realizing how much human behavior operates beneath awareness. Subscribe. Because what we explore here isn't surface level psychology. It's the stuff that quietly shapes your relationships, your confidence, and your power. Once someone commits even slightly, their brain wants to stay consistent. So subtle influences start small, a question, a minor agreement, a shared assumption. Later, they expand it, and the person doesn't want to contradict their earlier self, so they comply, not because they want to, but because their identity feels on the line. People don't follow authority. They follow certainty. Someone who speaks calmly, slowly, and without over-explaining feels more certain. Even if they're wrong, your subconscious mistakes certainty for competence, and that mistake gets exploited constantly. When someone is always available, they feel less valuable. When someone has limits, their attention feels earned. Dark psychology doesn't beg for time, it lets others request it. People feel understood when you reflect their emotions, not their words. You don't agree. You don't disagree. You say, "That sounds frustrating. I can see why that mattered to you." Now their nervous system relaxes, and relaxed. People are more suggestible because defenses are down. That's when influence slides in quietly. Here's the part most people aren't ready to hear. None of these techniques are inherently evil. They become dark when they're used without awareness or without consent. The same skills that create trust can create dependency. The same calm that creates safety can create submission. And the line between influence and control is intention, but intention is invisible, which is why awareness is everything. You don't lose control because someone overpowers you. You lose control because you never noticed the shift happening, because it felt natural, because it felt subtle, because it felt like your idea. The most powerful psychological influence doesn't push, it positions. And once you see that, you stop being confused by people. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing validation. You start noticing emotional dynamics instead of words. This isn't about manipulating others. It's about protecting your agency. Because the moment you recognize the frame, you can step out of it. And the moment you master your own emotional signals, your presence changes. Quietly, naturally, powerfully. If this changed how you see human behavior, subscribe, because the psychology we explore next will fundamentally shift how you understand yourself and everyone around you. And once that happens, there's no going back.